Hola and welcome to another episode of Character Modeling with me, S'more, aka Steve Moore. And this is a bit of a special edition. We've passed a major milestone. We just passed 500 subscribers, which I am so jazzed about. Thank you to everybody who subscribed. So this episode is for you guys. Now, so last episode we were really getting into the weeds regarding bump maps, and so I do promise to follow up on the IMM brush that I alluded to. So, and I'll drop the time code below regarding that. But first, let's step back and see the big picture for a moment. I want to kind of talk a little bit about my kind of maybe seemingly crazy, chaotic approach to art and character modeling, which is that, and this does. This is an intro. This does apply to production as well, but I'll get into that in another episode. But here in this specific project, what I've done, and right now we're looking at the real-time model as it stands. Nothing's finished. We're still in progress, but we're getting close. So what I've done is, even though the high res is not finished, I still have work to do on that. I have gone off and retopoed the model, baked it out, taken it into Substance, and I've begun texturing it. Now, the reason I did that is to see the forest for the trees, because by doing that, I'm able to see the model in context, right? So for a game engine, you have limits. You have polygon budgets and you have texture budgets, and at this current time, texture budgets are really the main issue. So I gave myself a budget for the costume, which is her legs, jacket, belt, halter top, etc., of 2K, right? The skin I've treated as a separate page because it's going to employ subsurface scattering, which means, a different treatment of the material. So the model is grouped, by materials, and the costume. If I had gone and finished the high res, like if I had taken it all the way to finish before doing the topo, I might have added a lot of extra details that I just didn't need, and so by doing this, by getting, I've got the high res basically broadly finalized. All the big shapes are in place. It's only really the details that are going to change at this point. So I can get away with baking it out and then refining the high res and updating the bakes. And we'll get into that in the future, right? But for now, the important thing here is that, I can take this model into a game engine and I can see it in context, and I can see that at the final resolution, I can see what's going to stand out. What is your eye going to see? Do I really need, for example, to make a bunch of little rivets and nuts and panel lines on my high res sculpt, which would be fun, but they're not going to show up. You're just not going to see them, right? So that's one example of how being able to kind of step back, see the big picture, saves you time. It saves you time, and it keeps you focused on what's really important, what's going to stand out, where's the eye going to go, where do I need to add detail. So there you go. There's a kind of an intro to my general philosophy of art. It's about balance, and also the final thing I'll add, another reason for doing things the way I do is this. I came from another art teacher, Barbara Bradley, back in the day, who used to say, when she was talking about drawing, but you can apply this to other things, right? She would say, generally what the approach is that you do a rough drawing first, and then you kind of trace it off and you clean it up for your final illustration. She always said, save something for the finish. Don't completely draw everything in your rough so that you're simply tracing, because if you do that, you're going to lose your enthusiasm, right? You're just going to go into trace mode. So applying that to the modeling process here, by by leaving some of the final details for the end, it's like I have something to kind of look forward to. Some finishing touches, for example, her cell phone, which I haven't built yet. I've allowed space on one of my maps for the cell phone because I know I'm going to need to do it, but I left it to the very end, you know, and so it gives me that kind of, it's like that little bit of something I'm looking forward to, that final touch of doing the cell phone, and probably, you know, by doing that, I know I've got all my bases covered. The whole thing's there. I can take as much time as I like or don't want to take with that cell phone, and just kind of, and keeps me excited. You know, the cell phone's just an example. You know, I've got some polish work to do on her anatomy, etc. But there you go. So with that, we'll get into the IMM brush. And I also, at the very end, I've got a little tip. If you're an artist that's thinking about how am I going to get a job in the future, I got a little tip at the end there for you, just for you guys, right? Cheers. Let's do this IMM brush. All right. So to create an insert mesh brush, the first thing we're going to do is import an OBJ of our basic stitches here. Now, I have buried that over here, so I repurposed the stitches we made for a bump demo the previous episode, and I'm just going to load those into the scene here, clicking edit before I go any further, and there they are. So they are very simple. I've made a point of keeping the resolution low. I've chopped off the parts that we don't intend to see. Yeah, the total poly count on this stitch is like 264, right? Because by the time you duplicate these things like 1,000 times, and you're going to see them, they're going to be tiny on the model. So they don't need to be super smooth, right? So there you go, Bob's your auntie there. So let's create an IMM brush. So we've got a little model here. All we have to do is go up to brush here and go create insert mesh brush and click new. So we're making a new one, and there you go. So now it's made this insert mesh brush. Before we go any further tuning this thing, let's save that thing. I'm going to put it over here in my little IMM folder, and I'm going to call it stitches IMM. Okay, so switching scenes to our jacket here. The next thing we want to do is take our IMM brush and turn it into what we will call an insert mesh curve brush, which means that we will be able to draw a bunch of these guys, you know, along the edge of our jacket where we want our stitches. So first, hitting the I key in the brush palette loads up the IMM menu, and then we can go down here, load brush, find that stitch brush we just created, and there we go. So now it's in our little IMM menu here. So to begin, before I start drawing stitches on this jacket, you want to delete all the subdivision history on your jacket before you go any further, and that's okay. You can always recreate it later, so not a problem there. And I'll hide all the gratuitous kind of stuff. This is all we're really looking at right now, is just this jacket. And you know, to draw a basic IMM brush, you just click on the model. Oh, and the other thing we need to do is bake all those layers. Okay, so no layers, no subdivision history, and off we go. So there we go. So we draw our stitches, and they're floating out in space. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do to alleviate that is, with our IMM brush active here, we go up to the brush menu and come down to depth. There's a little depth field here, and you see the icon where that little dot represents the center of the mass of our IMM brush, our object. So if we drag it down, so that line there is going to represent the surface, and let's just put that right on the surface and see what happens now. So now we click and drag, and yeah, so now a little better, right? They're sitting in the jacket as opposed to on top of it, right? So let's give that another little go there. That's probably more like what we're going to have. Not too bad. Perhaps I'll just adjust the depth just a smidgen under the surface, right? So they're just kind of sticking through. And they're going to be about that big on in the final product. And that seems to be a little bit better. Okay, cool. So far so good. So now we've got our stitches so that when we place them, they're not floating in space. But what about how are we going to draw a bunch of these little guys? The trick to that is you go up to the stroke menu here and you turn on under curve, you turn on curve mode. And now when I drag out, click and drag, I get this spline, and if we wait a second here, it'll update. And there you go, Bob's your auntie. You have a bunch of little stitches. Now you might be wondering, what about the spacing between the stitches, right? So let's pretend for a moment that we weren't happy with the spacing on our stitches. Maybe we want them a little further apart. So back in the stroke menu again, under the curve mode, you find curve step, and let's just dial that up to 2 for a second and see what we get. Cool. So a little difficult to see. Alt clicking on the surrounding mesh deactivates the curve edit mode, and I'm going to quickly split this, group split it. And so now there we've got our stitches isolated, and you can see, okay, by adjusting the curve step mode, we've increased the spacing between our individual steps, our individual stitches. And of course you could go the other way. You could go, let's say one was our default and that's where we're happy. If we wanted them closer together, you would just go 0.5, and then when we went back to our jacket, we'd end up with stitches that were much more compressed in spacing. So that actually looks pretty good. I think that might be the sweet spot. Cool. So 0.5 it is. Once we're happy with our stitches, stitch IMM Curve Brush, we shall save that once again, IMM Curve 2. And Bob's your auntie. We're ready to go. Now we're ready to go, but I think before I start applying stitches to this jacket, I'm going to make a low-res version of it, because at the end of the day, I just want to draw the stitches on here, and it's going to be easier if I don't have all these separate polygroups. Like right now, I've got all these different polygroups. When we draw our stitches, we're going to be extracting the ones we like, and it's going to help if this jacket here is just one big uniform piece. So the idea, simply put here, is just we're going to make a simple version of our jacket to project our stitches on, and later on we'll toss that and just keep the stitches, right? The stitches and our high-res version, right? So let's make a copy of this jacket, duplicate mesh here under the subtool palette, and I'll call this jacket low. And down here under Dynamesh, right? So under Geometry, Dynamesh, we'll set our resolution not too high, like 512, so we can see the details. I'll make sure to delete history again, Bagel meshes, and hit Dynamesh. Okay, 512, Dynamesh. Takes a second. And there we go. So this is high enough. We can still see the bump details. They're a little bit soft and blurry, but it's one big polygroup, which is going to make it easier for us drawing out these stitches. So IMM brush selected, and I'm going to trace the line of our bump detail, and there you go. So of course, that turned out pretty well, but if we we're still in curve edit mode, so let's if you wanted to let's say let's say we want to adjust, with the curve active, you can move these things around. The top point here, if you grab the top point, you can drag them up and down, and they're just kind of sliding across the surface. The other thing I found too, like if I got really lucky here. This thing turned out quite nicely, but often it doesn't. Often, like, it's not exactly where you want it. So you can either initially you can slide, you can edit this curve, the spline. If you alt click on the mesh, the base mesh here, that deselects your IMM brush, and they now become their own little subtool, right? Their own little polygroup. Now at this point, the background mesh is masked, so we could, if we wanted to, for example, switch to the move tool, and let's just pretend that maybe they weren't kind of quite flush with the surface. You could just, using the move tool, you could adjust their depth. You could move, these ones maybe could be just kind of slid across a little bit. Oh, that one, maybe that one needs to be a little bit closer to the edge. So in addition to, here's a good one, like these two little guys here, they're kind of floating out a little bit. So with my move brush, I'll just pop those in there, just dialing up and down the size of the brush with the bracket keys, which is the hotkey there. So you're able to, you can edit. Initially you could edit with the spline, and you can also use like the move tools and move. You could use move, if you wanted to move by topology as well, would work. There you go. So now, just going back to our IMM brush, got our first one in there, and then you're going to drag the next one out. Check it out. Looking all right. And you just proceed around the model. See? So before, let's say if you're happy with that, just remember to alt click on the surface, and that deselects that spline and enables you to draw a new spline. And it comes together pretty quickly. I think I'll switch to move brush there, just tweak those guys a little bit. And yeah, a lot of fun. A quick and easy way to add some very complicated details. So once we've happy with all our stitches, I have not finished, but just for demonstration purposes, we've got this single subtool jacket low, which includes our stitches right now. And if I turn on the polyframe tool, and I'll right click on the surface so that you can see the stitches have their own polygroup. You can tell that by the different color on them, right? So all we need to do now, once we're happy with them, is to group split. So under the split menu, go down to group split. Okay, and there we go. So it can be a little, like, the naming can be a little confusing. You've got jacket low 1 and jacket low. Jacket low is our stitches that we've just extracted. Maybe I can change the background color here because it's a little bit difficult to see. There you go. Okay, so stitches and jacket, right? And together, there we go. So the primary reason that I made the stitches as separate geo using our IMM Curve Brush that we just created is so that when we are texturing this jacket in Substance Painter, which is where we'll end up, is that we can isolate the stitches and give them their own material, separate from the surrounding layer of the jacket. And we can do that via an ID map. And we're going to generate the ID map based on vert colors. So if, for example, with a standard brush here, I'll just switch to RGB mode, right? So red, green, blue, right? That's just color. So we're just applying color, and I'm going to fill the jacket with white, which actually already is. But then switching to the stitches themselves, right? So there's the stitches. We'll give the stitches a black color, right? So with the V key, I'm switching to black RGB mode and filling the stitches with black. So now we have white surrounding leather jacket and black stitches. So that is going to make a very clear mask. And from there, all you do is export an OBJ for our stitches and for our jacket, right? So you turn off group. When you export an OBJ and you have vert color present, it will automatically carry with the model. So the OBJ will contain that vert color data, and whether you're an XNormal or substance painter, you'll be able to you will have the option of painting out vert color data, and you can use that as a mask. Sweet. Okay, so that's it for the IMM brush, and now it's time for our little Easter egg this week, and here it is. So getting a job, portfolios. Now you might have heard, for example, that when you're putting your portfolio together, that you really only want to put your best work in there, right? And now there's a yin yang to everything, but I just want to share with you how profoundly true that is, and then the flip side of it, right? So real story. I'm sitting at work the other day, currently at Ubisoft, and I'm looking at ArtStation, as we do, right? Like, you kind of, you're a bit tired, take a break, and I'll fire up ArtStation and see what's going on. And I came across an individual, I think it was a lady, and she had, I'll find her name later, but she had one single piece. Her ArtStation site had only one piece, right? But it was so good. It was so good that single piece had me intrigued. I remember I forwarded it to my boss. It was enough. Like it was so well executed that it was enough to get my attention, and I wanted to see more. Like if I was in the position of hiring somebody, I'm not, but if it was me that was saying, hey, we need another character artist, I would have, on the basis of this one piece, I would have been contacting her, reaching her out, asking HR to reach out to her and ask her if she's got more work, for example, because it was that good. So that's my first tip, which is that, it is so profoundly true. Less is more. Like, have your, if you can do one stellar piece that just blows people's minds, that's better than having a bunch of average work, right? Because people aren't initially, you just want to wow people. So one stellar piece is worth more than 1,000 average pieces, right? Now, of course, there's a duality to life. There's always a yin yang to this, and so practically speaking, what you are going to run into is, and this is where you can think about crafting your portfolio, and it could even kind of help you think about that one piece that you really want to shine, right? Like if you're going to put it takes a long time to make a character. So if you're going to put all this energy into something, it's worth thinking about what it is that you want to do, because what your portfolio shows people, what is in there, that's what you're going to get work at. So if you have a bunch of creatures, that's what's going to, you're going to get work as, making creatures, right? Because that's what people see, right? So so if for example, you don't have any armor in your portfolio, you're going to have trouble getting a job where they want somebody who can build armor. So that's the flip side of it. Your portfolio is, going to get you work based on what you show people, right? You may know that you can do it, but it's, unless people see it, they're going to assume that you can't, unfortunately. So I would say for people looking for work, and if you don't have a big portfolio of stuff, don't worry. I would say come up with a project, something that, and think about what you want to do, right? Because this is, what you do, what you show people is what you're going to get work for. So craft that piece to be exactly what it is that you want to do, and think, and you can think about, having a good variety of surfaces, so if you're building a character, if you can incorporate a variety of surfaces, like the character has some armor and some cloth, etc., that's going to kill multiple birds with one stone. So there's my tip for people looking for work and thinking about how, a portfolio, how to put your portfolio together. That's my experience, briefly. And with that, happy modeling. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.